Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, an inspired conversation space between Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner on the journey of motherhood through the common thread of parenting, relationship, and sexuality as a path to consciousness.
We keep our conversations honest, our experiences real, and our philosophies exploratory. We believe that in order to raise incredible humans, we first have to raise ourselves. We know that in order to rock the family, you've got to nourish the mother. If you are here, you care about paving a path of conscious and intentional motherhood, connected with yourself and your gifts, and also illuminating your children in theirs so we may raise more whole humans who can impact this world in a more humane way.
If you desire to integrate your learnings practically and supportively, head on over to bridgetwood.life or julietenner.love to go deeper. And for all live-streamed pre-release podcasts and all our free content, head over to our free Facebook group, Nourishing the Mother with Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner. We are Julie Tenner and Bridget Wood, and we are so grateful you're here.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Bridget Wood.
And I'm Julie Tenner. And today's podcast is part 2 of how do we roll with lockdowns. And we really hope that you got a whole heap of conscious thought and ways to move with your own experience of lockdown in last week's podcast. And this one gets juicier and explores even broader. So we really hope that you enjoy.
What else would you have to add?
I'm so wrapped up in your words, and I was thinking about, I've got to jump into my body. I was thinking about, oh God, what am I really pissed off at the external world for? Do you know what I'm really struggling with at the moment is the level of media censorship.
Yeah. I feel like I've already journeyed that. I feel like I'm becoming numb to that.
Okay, so I'm like, yes, I get, I'm angry at them for being short-term. So where am I being short-term? How can I expect my long-term vision? I'm like, what is that one? What is that one for me?
Where do you censor yourself?
Where do I censor myself? Okay.
And what are the benefits to the people? What are the benefits to the people who you are censoring yourself to that they don't hear your truth? Because I look at this, because I get really pissed off with censorship too. But then having a degree in both journalism and PR, I can see both perspectives. I can see the journalist in me wants to tell the stories that aren't being told. But the PR person in me recognizes that there are some stories you can't handle the truth, like there are some truths on certain populations based on education level, income level, a whole range of things where the message needs to be massaged. Because the truth, like propaganda, yes, we want to say is bad. And yes, propaganda has created world wars. But sometimes propaganda can save people from themselves. And some people need to be saved from themselves. If we don't inwardly govern ourselves, we will be governed from the outside. So that is the dance I play with. I am still much more for getting rid of censorship. However, I also look at where we found ourselves now and the fact that some of the people who have the views that they have, the more extreme views that they have been really big victims of big misinformation campaigns. Like people who really jumped down the QAnon rabbit hole. That was a targeted misinformation campaign over a long time, and that changes people's psychology. So I sit in the middle in some ways. I sit in the middle around some aspects of censorship. Yeah.
Thank you. I really appreciate that reflection.
Yeah.
I will take those journaling prompts into my day today. So I'm really grateful. Thanks for a little session on me, Bridget. Hopefully someone else got something out of that. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I mean, and there's different topics, and some topics that we'll look at and we hate the censorship. But also, like, even if you've got a charge on pharmaceutical companies, like, what is the value of them being multi-billion-dollar enterprises that control world narratives?
Whoa. I found myself saying, my husband and I started walking in COVID, so we're walking every morning early. We're getting up early and walking.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's fucking pharma. And my husband literally looks at me and goes, what is pharma? And I had that moment where I was like,
do we live in different universes?
Right. You know, pharmaceutical, big pharma. And he's like, what do you mean? Whoa. Whoa.
Yeah. It's funny, isn't it?
I was thinking to myself, yeah. And we are educated in the way that we're educated, aren't we?
We are, yeah. And I mean, like, having full awareness of some things has its benefits and its drawbacks. Like, how does knowing, you know, pharmaceutical ownership and like the influence that they have on government policy, knowing that is helpful to know, but sometimes it's really hard to live with.
It's true. It's very
so, like, everything has two sides.
Very true. Yeah.
You know, and
not knowing. I mean, we say this in consciousness all the time, don't we?
Yeah. Like, you're always knowing and not knowing.
Yeah. There's blessings in not knowing.
Yeah. Because imagine all of the angst that you haven't had to exist with not knowing that.
Totally.
Yeah, it's kind of like that saying, ignorance is bliss. I mean, it is to a degree. There's an edge to dance.
Extremes either way are where you're going to get into trouble in anything, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, you and I have got a coach we work with, and she's doing this whole, like, collapse your emotional polarizations on COVID. And I'm like, sign me up.
I'm like, oh, can't be bothered.
Because it is one of those things that people who haven't had a lot of emotions around big world events have emotions around, because of the way in which it's dictated, navigated, crafted daily life. And just
it's changed the world so utterly and completely.
Yeah.
We were talking about this over breakfast this morning in my family. I was like, we just thought we'd just keep growing, and instead we've stopped. Like, the world has stopped.
Yeah.
Like, it's the most extraordinary thing.
But then I always just think, but where's the conservation?
Oh, of course. But in terms
of how we know, how the world that we've known. Like, I even said that to my husband too. I'm like, can you, like, think about, like, we just took for granted cheap travel and flying anywhere. Like, we just did. It's just what you just did. Yeah. And, like, who knows when that's going to be a reality again?
Yeah.
And for whom, like, I mean, there's going to be a whole cohort of, like, gap year kids and people in their 20s who just miss that.
Totally.
You know, who'll go from study to family.
Totally.
Because it hasn't been available to them. And then,
it's
like,
not open. Yeah.
It's just,
and at the moment, neither of our states can't even travel in your own country.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, I mean, I think when you begin to try to, like, look at it, it's just almost too big to fully grasp the enormity of it. And then whenever I start to go, like, you know, it's really easy to look at all the huge business impacts on people who've lost so much. But then I always also think, gosh, there must be people who are just, this is a bonanza of a time, you know.
100% there are. 100% there are. Like I said, I have friends who are deeply suffering. I have friends whose businesses have 800 times X'd.
Yeah. So there's both happening.
Yeah.
It's just the reorganization of an economy. And that is messy, brutal, you know, like any kind of microcosm of change. It's like we're going through the biggest change socially since World War II. So we're living through something none of us have lived through. And we would, you know, like World War II, that saw the birth of so much technology and so much of how we now live. And so we're just in the eye of the storm.
And ultimately birthed the hippies who changed the world.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'd love to think when we feel like there's so much destruction, like, where is all of the opportunity, and what is this void that's in our kids from this experience? What's that going to create in them?
Yeah, I wonder that too. I do struggle with watching my teens in this experience. I do feel like the impact on them is big and will be generational.
Yeah.
Not just for like me, my kids, but for the kids who are in their cohort. Like I hear from my teacher friends that every lockdown it gets harder and harder to keep kids engaged in school. So they're just dropping like flies in high school.
God.
So this is a generational impact that we will see for decades.
And how much of that is also like, if you consider beyond the individual, which is devastating because we only have to take ourselves back to being teens, or you watching your teens and teens, you know, to see how crushing that experience could be, and among an already angst-filled time. If we then consider what's happening as a way forward to transform the education system, like how is what's going on also going to be like the point, the line in the sand where how we've done things cannot be done that way no more. Yeah.
Yeah. I wish I could see the dramatic change in the schooling that I see in primary school. I totally hear that you're homeschooling and following your child's lead, which is delicious. I did that last year. I don't think that that's a lesser quality education by any stretch of the imagination. I just do not have the mental space for that this year. So last year doing that, I was like, it was amazing for my child with additional needs. It was like life-changing for her. But it was a really big wake-up call for me to go, okay, I had a lot of idealized conceptions of this. And I've lived them for a consistent, you know, for a few months. And I don't want to choose this.
I don't want that. Yeah.
Yeah. Not because it's a cost for her, because I actually think it would be. But I can't balance that with the me and all of the other humans in our family. So it needs to look like an education system that I support in the best way that I possibly can.
So we're just jumping in quickly and interrupting this juicy conversation to let you know of our two favourite offerings that we have on at the moment. So I, as Julie Tenner, have Queen School that is opening on August 10. It's 5 weeks as a feminine and relationship transformative container. And Bridget.
Yes, and I have the Reimagining Motherhood membership, which is your space to come to feel nourished and connected and celebrated as the woman and mother that you are. And we have the Mother Seasons series coming up beginning on the 5th of August. Find out at bridgetwood.life.
So what I witness in primary school is you can enter an X, or certainly now in my experience with my child, I can enter an exit as much as I like. I can give parameters around what she can and can't do as much as I like. I can get creative with whatever the activity is and change into something else, and it's fine. Like the education, there's a fluidity, there's an online factor that's never existed before. Like it's largely, I think, I'm pretty happy with the experience that we're having. At high school, they have kept exactly the same system in place. And instead of sitting in a classroom, you're sitting on your computer for every class of the day on a Zoom call.
I just can't understand how, even at this point, no one has said, is this the best way for teens to learn? Like why?
And it's on a screen for 6 hours a day.
It's huge.
It's huge.
But is it because of the pressure of like looming VCE or looming HSE and like that you just
I don't even know. I don't presume to know what those pressures are, but I can see how it's transformed or is transforming the fluidity and flexibility within a primary school system. But I don't see those changes filtering down in a high school system.
Yeah, I've heard the same definitely with high school too, and like witnessing that particularly in kids who are already disengaged in high school. I mean, how do you keep kids who are
how can you?
in school?
How can you?
You can't.
No. And outside of that, I witness also an enormous social and emotional development that just isn't being met. So they're incredibly isolated, which lends itself to less wholesome choices for a lot of children.
Yeah.
I can see that my daughter, who started year 7 last year, so when we were in Melbourne here, we were in a 9-month lockdown. So for most of the year, we were in a lockdown. So she never really had a year 7. So she didn't really, which if you're not in Australia is our high school. So when you transition from one school to a bigger school. And so she never developed a social friendship group. And this year we're in and out so much, she isn't able to do that either.
So even when we've been out of the system, out of lockdown, and I've said, "Can you bring some friends over? We'll go do something." And she's like, I don't know anyone well enough to do that. And so here's my little year 8, 13, 14-year-old child who's already incredibly angsty as a teen anyway, who has I don't want to say no, but does not have any well-established relationships, none. And she's about to enter middle school by the time we come out of this. So I wonder about the impact on that. I certainly see that I have to keep a constant finger on the pulse of her mental health because my son is pretty introverted. He can do things on his own by himself, and as long as he can game with his friends every day, he seems to maintain that quite well. But for my daughter, who feeds off the energy of other people, and social value is one of her highest values, and who learns better in an in-person doing environment rather than being left to your own devices and trying to work it out on your own, she's really struggling. So I can see also that the mental health impact of this, the social impact of this is also really massive, particularly for teens. I do feel really sorry for them. Their experience is really hard.
I think that they are the real risk, probably one of the biggest risk categories in all of, probably across the cross section of ages. They are the biggest risk category because younger kids, they can roll with stuff. Like we get our energy right, they can roll with it. But at the teen age, they are very much individuating. They are forming connection well beyond the family now, and the social life is their life. And if you've taken that away, you've taken away part of their capacity to form who they are. Yeah.
So I'm watching that, feeling into that, going, oh, God, that's so hard. That's so hard. I don't have any answers to it other than I can just acknowledge how hard that is. So then from a parenting perspective, I have this 13, 14-year-old daughter who I'm it for her at the moment. So the parenting toll on that is huge, because even we went to the park the other day and she's like a little glue stick. She just like sticks to me. It's like I've got a Velcro baby again.
Because she's just looking for someone to connect to.
Just needs someone. And at the moment there's no one. Because we can't go anywhere, no one can come to us, and she hasn't established friends because we haven't really had an in-person school experience in which that's been facilitated. So I can also see that there's an increased impact on parents in that space.
Who are now being, I guess, kind of pulled back into maybe the intensity of infancy.
It is like the intensity of, that clingy 2-year-old, 3-year-old. It is like that again.
Wow.
Yeah, which I've got to say, some days I'm pretty good with, and other days I'm like, oh my God, get off me.
Kind of.
Can you just
kind of like the mother of a 2-year-old
from me?
Oh,
so I do find that the emotional holding that's involved is definitely harder, I think, as a mum now. So I really just want to honour that is really hard. And so I think that it's easy to slip into patterns of guilt. I should be for her. I should be meeting her in these ways. I should be able to have her on me 24 hours a day or however much she needs. But the real truth of me finding those boundaries is my self-care looks like my body needs, my psychology needs, because it's not quantity, it's quality of time. And how I can devote a quality of time to her looks like when I'm in my wellness and fullness. And that looks like I need these things.
To be able to do that.
To be able to show up in that way for you. So being able to put those boundaries in place with her and just have an open dialogue around needs and boundaries and what do you need right now? And, I just think they're really important conversations for us to be having with ourselves. Because you are the pulse, you said, Bridget, you are the nervous system of the family. Everyone's co-regulating off of you, which sometimes can feel like an enormous burden, and other days can feel like an enormous freedom when you think, wow, look at the capacity I have to open and create and
really go gently with yourself when there are those days where you don't feel like you have any capacity, because part of like regulating your nervous system will be that you do need to take big periods of time and space that is your own.
Yes.
And where your boundaries will be very clear and sometimes feel pretty firm to others, but that is how you can then be able to hold more and be with more intensity, is the degree to which you can pull back.
And boundaries allow other people to love you well. Right? If they don't know your boundaries, they can't actually love you well because you're always, there's a fake version of you present.
That says, oh, okay, or, oh, you know, and you acquiesce and then you get resentful and then they don't get
it's actually a more unsafe nervous system than the boundaried one who can say, I love you, but this is the line, this is the no. And here's how we're moving forward. There has to be a level of leadership. This is it, and here's the option, here's the choice, here's what can you do. Like, that is how someone knows how to love you. If they don't actually know what your truth is or what your boundaries are or what you need, how can they possibly give those things to you? They can't. So I also think, particularly in the conscious mother community, we've got to be really careful around the labels that we're putting on our own boundaries.
Yeah.
And how we're, in inverted commas, enforcing that, or just, I don't even like that word. It sounds like it's a power over, which it isn't. It's a power with, but it's a very strong self-worth that says, these are the things to my wholeness. It's okay for that to reflect something in you that's uncomfortable right now. That's okay. We roll with it in these ways in this house. We roll with it in these ways with our learning, but to really just honour your own nervous system, because it is quality, not quantity.
And also to look at, you know, where can you get help? Like, it can be really easy to feel like in lockdown you can't have anyone, but you can have caregiving. So if there is someone who you could call on that can watch your kids for a couple of hours. Like, I was wrecked last week and I had to do some major processing, and I just called my mum and I said, I can't parent right now. Like, I just can't. And so she's like, I'm coming. And so I needed 3 hours of just being in my own body, being of service to nobody else but my own needs, and being strong enough to allow myself that and not kind of go, oh, I can't ask, or oh, I just have to get on with it. But in the end, would have wrecked myself and not have been a particularly great day of mothering. Part of our willingness to hold boundaries also means being willing to ask for help and being willing to receive help without making it mean anything, just allowing that into our world. Because then when you can allow yourself to fully process what you need to process in your nervous system, you can then get back to being the nervous system of the family. You don't get to be that by short-circuiting your own needs and your own regulation. Because all that does is just projects onto, like a projector, your dysregulation becomes the dysregulation of the family. And that can be really hard. And maybe it's like asking a partner, like, to come home from work an hour earlier so that you get to do what you need to do to move through what's going on, and that be sacred time where no one comes to ask you for anything.
Because you come back better too, that there's an open awareness of, this is not selfishness, this is actually selflessness, because when you can move this and be in your wholesomeness, that's what you bring back. Yeah.
And then, like, they see, oh gosh, yeah, go. Like, I can see, like, you need that for you. And then you do that for them.
Yeah.
Because you can see when they need something.
Amen. Because often we don't like it the other way around either, do we?
Yeah.
It can be that sense of, well, I'm losing here. I'm losing something here in order for you to win.
How do you both get to win?
Yeah.
And therefore, if you both get to win, everybody gets to win.
Totally. Yeah, 100%. So, Bridgie, I think we wrap up here because we've had some really juicy, beautiful conversations that I hope our listeners really have some nervous system regulation and capacity that they find in them. That would be our greatest desire, that it offers you some starting place wherever that is, or just an extra tool in your toolbox for when it does get hard, because it does, and it's so fine. We hope that you bring conscious thought, but also the deepest self-compassion for the fact that this has never existed like this before.
Yeah, it hasn't.
And whatever you need in any moment is okay. So we really hope that's what you take out of this experience. So Bridgie, what have you got on at the moment, and where can we connect with you?
I would love to invite mamas who need a bit more community and a bit more connection to come and join us in Reimagining Motherhood. And this next month or so, we're looking at the mother season. So who you are as your children grow and what is there for you in your own growth. And so it's going to be a really beautiful deep dive into every age and stage, which is great. And you can find out more about that at bridgetwood.life. And what about you, Jules?
So I have Queen's School starting today, actually, and the doors for this round are only open until Thursday. There's only another 48 hours that you can get in on that 5-week relationship changing and transforming journey. It is a self journey that then leads on to Lovers School, which is a couple journey. So you can find out more about that at julietenner.love. Yeah. And we are nourishingthemother.com.au, Nourishing the Mother on Facebook and Instagram. If there was a topic that you would deeply love an answer to, or a question that you're ruminating on, or an area of challenge that you would love some insight into, then please reach out to us in a DM, a PM, or an email at either bridgetwood.life or julietenner.love, and we would relish the opportunity to meet you exactly where you're at. So by all means, put forward a podcast request.
Yes. Remember to nourish the woman, to rock the family.
And we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
Thank you so much for listening. We literally couldn't do this without you. Please share this podcast with anyone you think it would be medicine for.
If you desire to integrate your learnings practically and supportively into your life, then head on over to bridgetwood.life or julietenner.love to go deeper.
And if you feel like giving back a little to this free content, please rate us on iTunes or Facebook, all of which helps the podcast reach more mamas who need this type of tonic for the soul.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives.
Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.